Hi, it's me, professional foiled against cat poster here to talk about the brand new expansion in the Arcane card game spin-off, Beyond the Bundlewood. The most accepted, balanced, and well-liked expansion since whatever the KDA update was supposed to be. I will talk about new champions, new mechanics, and some updated cards during that time. I may forget a few things, but that's fine because so does Riot. Bandle City is a brand new region made of small furry creatures called Yordles, who have the special ability of cultural appropriation. All Yordle champions come from Bandle City, but some, if not most units in Bandle City are also part of another region. You can, however, only build 2 regions at once in this video digital card game. But as long as you have one mono-region card, you can play any Bandle City card that also has this region as part of their multi-region. Now, if you're still confused, it doesn't matter, because you can completely ignore this mechanic by playing Bandle City directly. And that's what you're going to do, because they literally do everything, oh my god. Before we begin, I'm going to put a little circle here. If the circle is green, that means I played the champion a bunch and I have a few wins with them under my belt and generally understand how to use them. Yellow means I've probably played against them a lot, but didn't play them myself quite as much. Red means I barely know anything about this champion at all and can only talk about what I can straight up read on the card and what others have said. I am by no means a professional player or game designer that has 200 years worth of collective experience under my belt. And I expect you to know about most champions and mechanics of a game that came before this expansion. Let's get to the fun stuff.
Bear witness to the only true ascendant. You are nothing. Pitiful, worthless, insufferable creature. I am a god. You perish.
First, we talk not about a Yordle, but our god and upper orc Xerath, whose special ability is to deal 1 damage to the weakest enemy every time you destroy an allied landmark. I am henceforth going to refer to destroying allied landmarks as kaboom for brevity's sake. Xerath's friends also have special landmarks that activate special effects when they kaboom. Countdowns also count as kabooms. In order to level up, you need to kaboom 4 times and then he levels up to be
Unlimited power, mine to control.
fine. He's fine, he does 3 damage instead of 1. It can get rid of tougher enemies, but it's not what I'd call a win con. Really, I'd say my favorite part of Xerath is not Xerath himself, but rather his followers. Kabooming to summon big stuff is really satisfying, and I have to admit, even killing stuff with Xerath's level 2 feels nice. Competitively speaking, it's not really what I'd call great, but he's still a fun champion nonetheless. And in the end, that's all I want in a card. Oh, but wait, he's an Ascended! He has a level 3 and the Sun Disc has been buffed, so now it's actually viable. Okay, I'm still dead. Xerath's level 3 makes him do 5 whole damage arenas to the weakest enemy unit if there's no unit to kill every time you kaboom, or at the end of a round. If there's no unit, it damages the Nexus instead. It used to be 5 damage directly to the Nexus and the weakest enemy at once, but it didn't activate on kaboom. Which I'm pretty sure was better, since when you ascend you really want to close the game out quickly, because if your opponent hasn't surrendered after the feature length show in a movie, then chances are they can and will kill you in 2 turns. Also, all enemies that die get obliterated instead, denying Nasus his precious stacks, because it just wouldn't be Xerath if he didn't fuck over at least 1 other Ascended in the process.
Did somebody say explosions?
Ziggs is a Yordle that, like Xerath, synergizes with kaboom. He deals 1 damage to the enemy Nexus and his blocker whenever he attacks.
A little boom and one really big one!
When he levels up, he just does 2 damage instead of 1. And he also hits the Nexus on kaboom. Ziggs was actually mostly used in burn decks because of his decent stat line, relatively cheap cost, and ability to get rid of most chump blockers and still deal Nexus damage with low risk. However, there is currently a Talia deck that consists of multiplying Ziggs with Stasis Statue and then unleashing the equivalent of a World War III on your opponent as more and more Ziggs bombard your Nexus with his passive. Hard to set up, but very funny if you pull it off. You can of course still play him with Xerath since they share the same level up requirement, but it's not really necessary.
Wouldn't be a quest. Ow!
Poppy is a 4-3. Her ability is that whenever she attacks, she gives +1/+1 to every allied unit with lower or equal attack than her, including Poppy herself. However, she usually dies whenever that happens. Because of Bundle City's ability to constantly generate value on low-cost unit, this buff is a lot more dangerous than it sounds. And because of this, Poppy was an absolute menace on release. However, Poppy had an accident and she lost 2 attacks, which severely nerfed her ability, and she is now barely seen at all. She's just outclassed by many other bundle units, but she can still be useful in some swarm decks. Alright, her level up, she gives +2/+2 and impact to every allied unit. Impact is also a new keyword that damages the enemy nexus every time the unit strikes. Kind of a lame keyword, but it can stack so you deal more damage with it. In order to level up, she needs to attack with allied unit 3 times. Though good luck keeping her alive for that long, you usually need a deck dedicated to keeping her alive and attacking. Which is easier said than done, because you also need her to attack with allies, so you need to protect those too. And by the time she levels up, the enemy is usually already dead. I could have sworn it was possible to trigger her level up with Azir and his Sun Soldiers, but apparently it doesn't work like that. Even though Poppy still buffs the Sun Soldiers, so it does trigger an attack, I'm not okay, sure, whatever.
Ahri and Lord Veigar, destroyer of worlds!
Veigar's special ability is to create darkness on summon. No, there is no other champion with darkness as a main theme, shut up! Darkness is a 3 mana 2 damage slow spell that can only target units. And that sounds terrible. However, at the end of each round, Veigar will buff darkness damage by 1. There are also other cards that can reduce darkness's cost and also increases its damage. One small issue. You can only do that with units that are in Bundle City only. So if you want to make a darkness deck without Bundle City, you have to cripple yourself on purpose, knowing all too well your darkness will just be less powerful and more costly. And I'm not even sure why any of those cards have to be in Bundle City in the first place, at least make them multi-region. Once you deal 12 damage with darkness, Veigar levels up and allows darkness to target anything. And by anything, I mean that it can now target the Nexus, because what else are you supposed to target other than units? Once Veigar levels up, it's basically a race to the finish and trying to destroy their Nexus with Decimate's mentally unstable brother. However, Darkness's main weakness is it being slow, but that can be fixed with...
It's a lot of darkness out there. Let's make some of our own.
Senna is a card that, just like in League, served only to make Lucian go through an edgy transition. However, she is now out of the fridge and ready to be an actual champion. Senna actually has a really cool and unique ability, and I'm not being sarcastic this time. She makes slow kill and damage spell fast. This is mostly used in tandem with Darkness, as Senna also creates a Darkness when she is summoned and attacking. There's plenty of slow spells that benefit from this too.
Not one more family, not one more soul.
She levels up after she sees you kill 3 enemy units with spells. Her level up just makes the fast spells cost 1 less. Very cool character, and I kind of wish she didn't feel so locked up with Darkness and Veigar, but you know. Oh, she can also level up if you kill Lucian. I don't think I've ever seen anyone do that, since it requires putting Demacia in your deck, but it's really funny that Lucian can now be the fridge husband. It's only fair.
The world can wait. Our people need us now.
Nami's ability is simple. Whenever you cast a spell, she gives +1 attack to the weakest ally. She levels up after you get 8 spell mana, may it be by a tune or just ending your turn with extra spell mana. Now this doesn't sound that bad, and even after she levels up it's only a small buff. However, there is one small issue. You see, there is a card named Autopus, a 1 mana card with a tune. So it already pays for itself. That creates a 1 mana spell called Prank. Prank is the card in this game I hate the most. Prank is a card that not only has a really good and versatile effect, but it does it for an insanely cheap cost with no way to counter it. So what does Prank do? Prank will take 2 cards from your deck or your hand as long as it isn't a champion. If it takes cards from your hands, it will also reveal them. It will now let you add a special debuff, such as making the unit vulnerable with some stat debuff or unable to block, that type of thing. However, there is also one debuff that makes the card cost 2 more mana. This is what everyone picks. This is what you always want to pick. 2 mana is an enormous nerf that completely throws off balance whatever plan for a curve you may have had. And not just that, you also get 2 of your cards revealed, so now your opponent knows part of your hand, and since Prank is a focus spell, the +2 mana cost will just happen. If Prank gets a spell or a landmark, it will also always give a +2 mana cost option, because they didn't think to give unique debuff for those. Prank is just dirty, it just spits in the face of so many parts of the interactivity and reaction between players and... Alright, we are talking about Nami, weren't we? Yeah, Nami is decent, and Udyr Plus both help with her level up and triggering her buff. But the main issue with her is elusive units. Elusive is a keyword that has always been on thin ice. Their main weakness comes from their low base stats, and anything that makes elusives harder to kill is an issue, because there's just no good way to stop elusives from rushing your nexus if you don't play elusive yourself, have sharp sight, or some really good and probably expensive board clear. So with Bandle City, we now have to deal with elusive swarms that get buffed up attack, health, and enough spell generation to just keep on getting stronger and reaching numbers capable of triggering a stack overflow. Due in no small part to Admiral Shelley, an elusive which gives +1/+1 to every other allied unit whenever you use 2 spells. That combined with Nami made killing any of the elusives near impossible if you didn't kill them on summon. And even then, that deck had so many burst spells they could usually sneak a few buffs in before you even get to kill them. Alright, I'm going to make a lightning round on some champions I do not care particularly about. I also have very little experience with them, sorry if those are your favorites. Tristana benefits from summoning multi-region units. Every time you summon a multi-region card, Tristan the unit summoned get +1 attack, and when she levels up, she also gives impact. She is mostly a support champion rather than a win-con one. I wouldn't call her a bad card, just underperforming compared to the rest of the bundle gang. Sion is a pretty expensive card that benefits heavily from being discarded, except instead of being discarded, he'll be put back into the deck and give your strongest ally overwhelm. If you discard powerful enough units, you'll eventually get him to level up, in which case he'll get the Last Breath ability to, on death, revive as an ephemeral unit and rally. This makes him extremely scary as you have the choice between keeping Sion alive and dealing with his metric ton of overwhelm damage, or killing him and dealing with his metric ton of overwhelm damage, but again, what else? Galio. The formidable keyword is interesting and probably one of the most unique keywords we had in a while. It makes units deal damage with their health instead of their attack, changing fundamentally how unit combat works, which is neat. Sadly, that often means that you get one unit with a metric ton of HP that gets healed completely every turn, but it's also really easy to counter with any form of silence, which is extremely funny because the formidable gang are supposed to be made of petricite, which silences magic, so the fact that you can silence the silencer is beautiful irony. I didn't talk about Galio because I usually don't see him do much. He gives HP to other units and his level up makes allies rally when your allies take damage. The formidable keyword is the cool highlight here, not Galio. He fits his deck fine and he's a pretty good finisher, but because you usually only drop Galio when you're about to level him up anyway, he only shows up as a finisher for a couple of turns. Which is fine, I suppose, we do need more high-cost champions anyway.
Too slow, too slow.
Ahri is a champion that has synergy with an old mechanic, which is nice, too bad that mechanic had to be recall. I have a love-hate relationship with recall. On one hand, putting back your opponent's card back into their hand allows you to place your card again later, so it's not a complete loss. It's a nice exchange to gain tempo, and it's a tool that can work both offensively and defensively. That does require some thought to be used efficiently. But it's also extremely frustrating to fight against when you try to challenge or target a unit, and then they recall it, or god forbid recall both it and your most expensive unit, because Homecoming came from being a joke to giving me PTSD. Coming back to Ahri, her ability is to recall the unit next to her when she strikes, and then strike in space. So she strikes twice if she strikes with a unit right of her. Considering the fact she has quick attack, it can make her pretty slippery, especially if her attack is buffed. And that's not even counting all the recalls this deck is surely loaded with, but Ahri is supposed to be hard to pin down, so thematically it makes sense.
My search is over. Now I hunt.
Her level up is where things become scary. Ahri gets elusive, which is already bad because the sole existence of his keyword puts fear in whatever intern they put in charge of the balancing, but she also gets the ability to recall and strike the unit next to her as much as she wants during a round, while before she could only do it once. This means that if there's a bunch of units and a buffed up Ahri with say 6 attack, then you have to deal with 6 quick attack from Ahri that will recall all the other units, recalls the player probably benefits from, but at that point you're probably already dead anyway. But she's not quite as bad as... Pikachu's ability allows him to create a fleeting Mark of the Storm spell when he is summoned. If a unit is hit by a Mark of the Storm twice, it is stunned and takes 2 damage. The fact that this is a 0 mana spell and that Kennen is so cheap makes it really easy to stock up on these and keep the opponent in check. Kennen's level up requirement is also quite problematic. It requires you to summon the same unit 5 times. One small issue. Kennen is the only unit that is really worth summoning 5 times. He's cheap and has a great summon effect, and since he's the one you want to level up anyway, it just makes sense to recall him. But then that means that any other unit that benefits from being summoned and recalled multiple times just get ignored. Because why would you use your precious recall spells on them when you could use them on Kennen? It's sad because I really like some of those other cards. There's one that gets a new keyword that stacks every time you recall it, and I barely ever see it. Okay, so for some reason I completely forgot to talk about Kennen's level up in my script. I just forgot to hide it. So Kennen, when he levels up, he also creates a Mark of the Storm when he attacks or he's blocked. That's pretty good to spam you even more. He also, gets +1/+1, which with quick attack makes him pretty hard to block reliably. Very good champion. Very cool, very cute.
Hot on the trail.
Caitlyn spawned the best emote in the entire game, so she's automatically S tier. Caitlyn's main gimmick is putting a pipe bomb in your mailbox. Whenever she strikes, she plants 2 flash bombs randomly on the 10 card at the top of the enemy deck. Whenever they draw trapped cards, a random enemy unit take 1 damage per flash bombs. The damages do stack and can even hurt tough units. It's a fine gimmick, in theory, but because you never know what the flash bombs are going to hit, it's extremely unreliable, and you'll often end up having the flash bombs trigger at the worst possible moment on the worst possible target. There are a few other cards that can drop flash bombs to maximize your chances, but even if your opponent's deck is full of them, you'll need to cross your fingers every time. And every time you'll be disappointed. Kate is still a really good card by herself though. A 3/3 with quick attack is nothing to scoff at, and she's actually played in a bunch of other decks because of it.
Practice, as they say, makes perfect.
Her level up condition is to have 10 traps activate. It can be mushroom or her flash bombs, so she's often paired up with Teemo.
Bandle Scout Troop Leader, at your service.
Well, you're certainly the fuzziest partner I've worked with.
After her level up, she puts 4 flash bombs instead of 2, but most importantly, she hits the enemy Nexus for the same amount of traps that was triggered during that round. This mitigates the whole RNG part a little more, because even if the flash bombs hit nothing that you want, it still augments the Nexus damage of Caitlyn, and it works as a pretty nice finisher. Although you're probably going to use, I'm not sure if Kate and her fucked at one point, but it sure feels like it, to trigger all traps at once and nuke the Nexus with mushrooms instead.
Karina? What brings you here?
Business and pleasure, Sheriff.
Good lord!
But just in case that isn't enough, Kate's got your back.
Warning, warning, warning.
Working as intended.
Rumble is a discard-centric champion, and we already had a few champions like this, Draven and Jinx to name a few, but Rumble differentiates himself by actually choosing how many cards you want to discard to see how much you want to pimp your ride. It's pretty clear he's expected to be played with a Sion gang, but I don't really like playing with Sion and prefer to simply pair him up with Riven instead. It's quite simple really. Riven makes the blade, Rumble discards the blade, we do this for 3 turns and then we die.
We're getting hot, hot, hot.
If Rumble manages to deal 12 damage and not die, he will level up and gain the ability to create special mech cards whenever you deal Nexus damage. If you already have one in your hand, it will buff the mech with +1/+1 and reduce its cost by 1. Mech units can be created without Rumble by discarding other cards. They are of course pretty strong for their cost, but you won't always get the choice of a mech you want, and you usually still need to discard something to get them. But because of Sion and a lot of the other cards associated with him, discarding is not as much of a setback as it used to be, so you shouldn't worry too much about running out of cards.
Find your strength. Use it well.
Listen, I really like underdogs. I like the idea of a small and weak thing somehow rising up and, against expectations, manage to become better than anyone could have ever expected. However, this doesn't really work when the underdog has to be killed on sight or he's going to, in the following episode, become God and wipe out the entire human race. What is this, a fucking isekai? In other words, here's the Fated keyword and also Pantheon. Fated is a keyword that whenever you target this unit, it gains +1/+1. It can only happen once per round though. Now that may not sound too bad, but this stacks up extremely fast, and because Targon is full of ways to heal their protagonists, you're going to start to panic and hope to god you draw a way to silence, or at least to slow down the monster that is now facing you. Now we finally get to Pantheon. Pantheon has the Fated keyword of course, but what matters is his level up. Pantheon's level up requires you to target an ally in 5 different rounds. Once he levels up, he gains a random keyword for every time you targeted an ally. Alright, I don't need to tell you why this is bad, just think of the absolute worst keywords and now mix them together. Pantheon decks are particularly hard to face if you don't have the right answers for it. But it also gets countered by most forms of silence. Then again, everything gets countered by silence. Unless...
You and me, we got this!
Yeah, nice one, Riot. Yuumi comes with a brand new keyword called Attach. This keyword makes you able to attach a unit to another unit already in play, adding the stat and keywords of the attached unit to the unit it's attached to. I'm going to refer to the unit condemned to have a cat on their head for the rest of the game as the host for brevity. It's basically like a mix between a slow and burst spell. It's fast enough that you can't stop a unit from getting attached, but it still forces the player to end their turn. The only way to remove an attached unit is to remove the host. Even if you silence it, it will not be removed, making it the only unremovable buff type as far as I know. And even if you do remove the host, the attached will go back to the player's hand like nothing ever happened, making the attached card essentially unkillable unless you decide to drop it alone. What a great and interactive mechanic. Why does this card exist? Why? Yuumi gives +1/+1 to the host at the end of each round. This means by the end of the round, the unit that has Yuumi will have +3/+3 in stat if you count Yuumi's stat. Yuumi levels up after her host or herself attacked 3 times, but you need to be pretty desperate to send Yuumi alone. That or you just want to see the cat suffer, which is understandable.
If we split up, we can... Yuumi, wake up! What? Sorry, I was napping. What did you say? Let's find a new best friend!
Her level up gives Yuumi a spell shield and she reapplies extra protection at the end of each round, because you just can't have pussy without protection. This video is sponsored by Durex.
Great Spirit, aid us! Lend us your power!
Boar, Whiteclaw, Bear! Udyr has been kind of a joke recently and he may get buffed by the time this video is out, but just as it's good to talk about champions in their prime, let's not forget about champions who are dead on arrival. Udyr's main shtick is Stance Swap. Stance Swap is a 3-mana slow spell that allows you to give different buffs to your unit. Those buffs are usually pretty good, like regeneration and extra health, big stats or just hitting everything for some reason. Some other cards can create Stance Swap and they are pretty decent, but Udyr himself just really falls behind compared to most of the other champions. Udyr creates a Stance Swap whenever he is summoned or strikes. If you already have a Stance Swap, it sets its cost to 0. Here's one small issue. Udyr is a 5-mana 4/4, that's already a red flag, but his ability requires him to attack to make the most of it, which you don't want to do with a unit that has less health than Orgon and Upper Azir. There's a 2-mana card with more health than him, and he's more useful too, so just use your buff on that. Udyr's develop condition is so weird too, it requires you to hit the Nexus 7 times, and I'm not a huge fan of it. I get it's supposed to synergize with Sejuani and Freljord, but there's only 1 stance, maybe 2 if you count Overwhelm that works with this. I don't get why you give him a level up condition that feels so disjointed from the champion himself. And I like Udyr, he's a fun champ, I like the stances and the followers and the animation. But Udyr himself feels like each part of him was designed with something different in mind. Anyway, once he levels up, Udyr gets +1/+1 for every stance you cast this game. It can or be a lot or absolutely nothing. His stats are actually a nice welcome because it means you don't need to worry about his survivability quite as much. Just slap a boar stance on that bad boy and he'll be set for life, but good luck surviving to that point.
Ha! Veigar's never!
I have a friend that makes Poppy X Gnar fanfiction and I've seen things, man. Now there's probably nothing I can say about Gnar that hasn't been said, but I try anyway. Gnar's ability is to create a Poké Stick on strike, a 2-mana fast card that deals 1 damage and draws 1. Basically, all you need to know is that Gnar has quick attack and really good stat for 4 mana, so you're almost guaranteed to get a successful strike and as such a good guard to boot. Now if that was the end of it, Gnar would be fine. He would be annoying for sure, but not impossible to deal with. The problem is his level up. If you damage the enemy Nexus in this round and Gnar is on the board, he will level up, gaining a few stats, overwhelm and give vulnerable to the strongest enemy. And yes, he does keep quick attack during his transform, but lose the ability to make Poké Sticks on strikes. It does come with a slight drawback however. Gnar will unlevel himself up at the end of the round if you started with the attack token. Now here's the problem. Overwhelm and quick attack on a 6 attack card is already pretty terrifying. You mix that up with giving vulnerable and you get something that will absolutely plow through your units like Gnar plus Poppy on that fanfic. I'm sorry, I've just seen things. Thankfully, I don't think Gnar is broken by design. Maybe he needs to get tweaked a little, but I'd say he just needs a few stat change and to get quick attack taken the fuck away from him on level up. Gnar also has other followers based on transform that activate if you hit the Nexus on round ends like Gnar. That can vary from just stat buffs to what in the void am I looking at? Honorable mentions. Iceborne Legacy was buffed from a slow spell to a burst spell. If you don't remember what it does, it gives all units of the same name +2/+2 everywhere. So everyone lost their shit when a new deck with Elusive Sporo showed up with instant buffs. People blamed the buff for being too good at first until they realized that it's just Elusive being Elusives again. Then everybody collectively shrugged and went on with their day. But Riot still nerfed it for good measure. Winterbreak Spider is still fun though. Minimorph is today's hot topic on this card is technically not OP, but it sure makes me want to die. With the first burst speed champion removal, Minimorph transforms any unit hit by it into a 3/3 silenced Souljack, allowing you to instantly win against basically any opponent that depend on big expensive units. But since Swarm decks are still thriving, it still makes the spell's win rate not that impressive and it's unlikely to be nerfed in the future. Path of Champions is a newish roguelike card game that Riot is desperately trying to push to distract players from the fact that Yordles are committing several war crimes on the balance of this game. This game mode also completely replaced any other lab mode, Repurf mode, you will not be missed. Contrologist and Loping Telescope makes people ask how much value generation is too much value generation. Riot answers with not enough. Everyone takes another solid dose of copium with the new recall cards, thinking that this time they can make Yasuo work. However, he has yet to be drawn to prove he synergizes with anything. And that's it for today, and probably ever. I know saying Bandle City Bad is not a really hot and original take, but I think this entire expansion was a really interesting clusterfuck of ideas and mechanics that made this whole thing kind of fun to talk about and also make fun of. But I still like this game, and a lot of old decks are still viable, old cards still get updated, and I still believe it is the best digital card game out there. The fact I have nearly all cards in the game as a free-to-play player is insane. And this is still a game with a pretty high amount of deck diversity because of it. So, to not end on a sour note, here's a little montage.
We had a hell of a ride, but you thought we were riding to heaven. Well, I motherfucking lied, so crank that funky shit to 11. Hey man, what's up, bro? You hear about Bo, dude? Kid sucks, man. Kid's trying to rap. He was in theater in high school. Was that him? What? It was that him. Holy shit. Oh, fuck. This motherfucker scares me. I can't do this shit. I can't do this shit. I can't fucking do this. Just shut up! Photosynthetical, I want a botanical, and I'm kind of theoretical. Quantum mechanical, alphabetical, a word puritanical, not a hypothetical. I rule tyrannical. Tyrannical Saurus Rex. Fuck the system, solar plex. Us, the Lone Star Texas. Yeah, too smart to be sexist. Hey, slow it down, the shit's too quick. Fuck it, stick with it. The kid is too sick to quit. Haters, suck my dick. Handle the candle, lick the wick. No stop. No. You better than than that. Come on, male definition, there's a letter in that. Spell male, then repeat the second letter in that. A, if you gotta go, don't letter in that. I said I got a green light, J Gatsby, and no leaking's just for Maxi. So leak my tracks, they're tax-free, and that's the way it should be if you ask me. Take this music, choose it, use it, fuse it, abuse it, lose it. Some of you like it sweet, but if it's just me, then B, let's ride the beat. Fucking in a bucket, my stomach is gonna upchuck. Texas Ranger, no walker, get up, Chuck. Pixar sticks are slick cause they fucked up. What a fucked up, stuck up, suck up. Say this shit is crap. Scoff, write me off as some white kid trying to rap because I'm willing to quit.
Just kidding, the kid will keep killing this shit.
We've had a